All right, so sovereign clouds. You wanted to touch on sovereign clouds. I've got a couple of points to mention, but I'll let you start the conversation.
Because we obviously talked about data sovereignty,
Yeah.
and again, this came out of something I was on a sort of panel debate that went on again in Barcelona on sovereign clouds, because obviously, they think they're private and therefore VMware have got an interest in them. And there was, guys from OVH Cloud, from a German provider, but also from a researcher at St Mary College London, University of London, who was really good. But the reason I wanted to bring it up was I think there is probably a lack of understanding about the gray areas or the risk in sovereign cloud. You aren't careful. And specifically, because obviously what you're looking to try and do with the sovereign cloud is to ensure that you've got operational autonomy. You're basically stopping the ability of foreign governments to ask for or access or get hold of the data that you're holding.
Yeah.
And there's clearly a difference between data residency and data sovereignty. We've seen a situation, you raised your fingers, you've obviously got we've seen situations where people have talked about data sovereignty, but they haven't realized that you've got to keep all the metadata and any other sort of assorted customer information completely within that sphere as well. And therefore people have been caught out by, I've put my, my data into a sovereign cloud or a sovereign area. If you look at what Google and Amazon and Microsoft have been doing, creating these regions and saying, "Hey, we've got that," but unfortunately, I've sort of fallen foul of the fact that they didn't ensure that all the data was resident in that geography. So I think but the second one, and this one sort of came out slightly more strongly, was that if you're looking for a sovereign cloud provider, the only risk-free, and this is about risk, and it's not a black and white, decision. If you're looking for a risk-free cloud, sovereign cloud, you really need to go with a cloud provider who is local to the area you want to put it into and does not particularly, there'll be a number, but really restricts its operation. So, for example, in the EU, you might say because of the EU's laws around GDPR and the like, then, having a German or a French provider, and you can have a sovereign cloud because they'll follow the sovereignty and residency rules fairly strongly. The problem comes, whereas if you actually use a provider with operations in the States, or in the case of the hyperscalers who are based in the States, there's a real issue that under the terms of, Patriot Act was replaced by the Cloud Act, and it got rid of the worst elements of the Patriot Act and everything. But nonetheless, there was a real thing coming out from this guy from University of London who's been doing his research that says there is a danger that the US, and we all defaulted to the US, but you can imagine other jurisdictions might want to do this, could be able to legally request that what you thought was sovereign data. And make it even more than that. And it was interesting, the OVH Cloud guy was there, and OVH Cloud have an American operation. Now they've physically set the OVH Cloud operation up as a separate entity without no connection to OVH Cloud in Europe, quote unquote. But it's sort of you think how, and again the debate became twofold. One was, how far was that a mechanism to try and get round the potential problems of data residency and cloud sovereignty and all those sort of issues? so that the Americans couldn't get hold of it. And the view, if you like, the researchers' view was that in extreme cases, and again, it's risk, in extreme cases, the American government might decide that they're going to take that one and test it in the courts.
Yeah, and just one point to make there is that um, the because you were talking kind of about sort of data sovereignty. This is kind of more around sovereign clouds. So actually
Oh yeah,
the compute aspect of it, I
yeah,
think, is also the another sort of focus because the data sovereignty. Yes, I mean this would kind of be part of that, but then there is the compute aspect of it. Not only is the physical part. So actually, where is the cloud data center actually located? Because believe it or not, clouds are actually they do run on computers, so they do have hyperscale data centers. Um,
you
so
heard it. You heard it here today,
you've
guys.
heard it here first, contrary to popular belief, where people just use iPhones and go, "Oh yeah, I've got my phone, my photos all in the cloud somewhere." Um, so that aspect of it, I think, is different because, as you said, for things like networking, for example. So, if you're kind of, connected to a network or using or you've got a particular network configuration, in the cloud, obviously a sovereign cloud will ensure that, hopefully, the idea is that it's within that particular, geographic region, within the block or whatever, within even in country if necessary as well. So that the likes of NSA and whatever don't sort of
Yeah,
manage to get their hands on it, or if you believe the Chinese rumors and kind of in terms of Huawei's switches kind of diverting network packets to China or something. So that would be part of that. But there's other aspects as well. So data residency, yes, as we said, that's kind of the data sovereignty aspect and encrypting that and so on. But then there's also things like EU-based support. Or European-based support. Let's say. So let's say we're doing it in Europe, or we're doing it in the EU specifically, because as you mentioned, Germany and France. So it's kind of all the tech support and everything is exclusive. All the staff are there, so um,
yeah.
they're not offshore, for example. Right, and offshore can be anybody, really. US, India, China, whatever it's happening in Australia, what it happens to be. Then the other one is security. So not just the physical and kind of whatever security measures, but also things like encryption and key management
Mm.
as well is all provided within that region, whatever that region is, as we said. Uh, However that region is really defined, as we said, whether it's the country or bloc or Europe or something. And then the other one is oversight, having the oversight, in terms of safeguards and controls, and having compliance around, ensuring compliance around the sovereignty. So I think that brings in a lot more of the cloud itself, not just the data being, make sure it's
Absolutely.
running on local hard disks, in that hyperscale data center that happen to sit in, France, Germany, or in Europe in general, or the UK or something, versus the US or China or whatever.
I think the thing from my perspective, listening to what they were talking about, and obviously I think you've backed up an awful lot of what the guys on there were saying, is when you go as a customer to make your decision on a sovereign cloud, you've got to have a clear understanding of all those elements
Mm.
and obviously your own risk, analysis and awareness.
Yeah,
Yes, it sounds very nice to go to an AWS region or a GCP region and go, yeah, great. You need to dig into those things as to where that's all going to take place. All those elements we're talking about.
yeah,
So yeah, it just felt, because we talked data sovereignty, and you're right, this is much, much broader than that. But
yeah,
what came out was that, you know, if you want a completely zero risk approach from a cloud sovereign perspective in terms of accountability, oversight, all those,
mm.
you better have a local provider who doesn't work broadly outside that region or that country,
Yeah,
which was an interesting one. I mean, that but it is about risk. I mean, sometimes it's not worth going down that route because the risk of it being an issue is very, very minor. Be aware of it. That's all it was, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I mean the points I was actually making on that is all because apparently, well, T-Systems has a sovereign cloud. So we have a Google sovereign cloud as well as a number of other sort of options for customers. So all of those points that I mentioned are kind of in that. That's what really T-Systems, um, provides in terms of the features and functionality of the Google sovereign cloud. So that's kind of a layer that we drop on top of GCP, Google Cloud Platform, to ensure that all those things actually are complied with. So that's certainly seemingly is very important for German customers, certainly because of their sort of regulations and compliance that they need to all the hoops that they need to jump through. But then it does extend also EU wide, at least. I'm not sure if anybody in the UK really makes use of it, but certainly EU wide, it's of interest to other countries as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a useful insight too, in the sense that just gives a level of comfort that actually people are looking into that. I mean that it was I just was listening to them speak, and there was, I say, OVH Cloud. I wish I could remember the name of I didn't take the name of the German provider down, but that it I just felt that unless you're aware of all the issues that you just said, you could make decisions that could still leave you at risk.
Yeah. So the one thing I was thinking, okay, so I mean, even the big three, the hyperscalers, also offer sort of sovereignty, I think to certain degrees, but how can I don't know how you trust that. I mean, you can maybe trust sort of someone
That's
like yeah,
yeah.
someone like T Systems because they're kind of saying this is because we can offer it as I believe my understanding is it can be offered as a private cloud, but also it can be like I said, put on as a layer on top of things like GCP. So that vendor is within that same market, right? It's within that same geography and space or block. So you could probably look at that and say, okay, so I think they're kind of trying to meet everything that our mutual government kind of has put out on these things. So they're kind of compliant with that. But then I would, if it was kind of AWS or somebody who's kind of a lot bigger and they're global in terms of their data centers and things like that. For things like networking, I'd probably want to say, actually, I want to put my own sniffer on the network to see where, what you're
Whereas,
saying is actually happening, that all my packets are not going via, Kansas or something,
I mean,
then coming back again.
yeah, if you were, but even if, down to the situation where if you were uh, use in a German environment with German customers,
Mm,
but you are an American company, let's say in the healthcare market, who's got information on German customers,
mm,
but then the whole of the let's say AWS or Azure comes under American. Oh my goodness me, there's something going on. The question mark, and I say it is a question mark. I don't think it's been tested in the courts, but the question mark from the sort of legal researcher in the university was this could be an issue if the Americans really want to make an issue of it. In terms of, but it would be costly. There were lawyers and God knows what.
yeah. But wouldn't
And
wouldn't that be at the data protection layer though, at the sort of a GDPR, rather than the physical cloud or how the data is
well, no,
how and where it's stored?
the suspicion was that if in within that German operation
Mm,
there was data on American customers, for example,
mm.
how do you separate that out? How do you ensure that the whole thing doesn't get sort of pulled into a
Well, it's
it,
wouldn't it be the reverse, the GDPR sort of reverse, whatever the American version of GDPR is, and then that German company has to comply with that?
cloud acts? Yeah, it could be, it should be,
Mm,
but again, it just came out as a Okay, there's some questions there
Yeah.
around that, and we almost need, a cloud lawyer to come and talk us through that one.
Copilot.
Yeah,
ChatGPT.
well,
Yeah.
or you get a cloud lawyer in on this one, and you might lose all your audience. But I mean,
Yes. I wouldn't be able to afford one, believe me. So they wouldn't come on for free. So
oh,
the other,
I can think of a guy who come on probably for free. You know Frank Jennings? Have you come across Frank? No, great guy.
oh, maybe we should. Maybe we should have him.
I
Yeah.
don't. He might be up for
That'll be
uh,
cool. That'll be an
a
interesting
debate.
conversation. I'd be curious about because I mean we're sort of I think asking the right questions, but not necessarily sort of not we're
Well,
not lawyers. We don't know the
no,
exact
exactly.
answers.
And it was the same in the panel debate, is that you got to that point where you're going, it's a potential risk, but I'm not quite sure how far,
Yeah,
they would
yeah, yeah,
take
yeah.
it. Would Americans go to that level? If funnily enough, all
Yeah.
the debate focused on
I
America.
don't know.
And
Yeah.
it was really strange. Yeah.
So the last point on that is, and I think this is where that kind of because like the T system sort of sovereign cloud, or indeed any really sovereign cloud that's kind of focused is probably geographically based. It's kind of in Europe, it's in Asia, it's in
Yeah.
Australia, whatever, right? And it kind of stays there. It's not T systems is not kind of saying we're going to do sovereign cloud in the US or sovereign cloud in Australia or something. Um, and that's the difference between something like that as a sovereign cloud versus, for example, as I said, you're trying to ensure that, let's say, your serverless environment
Yeah.
doesn't start a resource in the US, whereas actually you were expecting it all to be in the AWS, EMEA region or
Yeah.
European region,
Yeah.
right? Or at least in the data centers and the regions that are
Yeah.
located in Europe or the UK. So things like things like serverless where we don't necessarily always care about where the compute resource is coming from. We just say, here's the image, spin it up. Here's the
Mm.
Terraform script to build the environment, and it goes off and create the world engine, as I call it, kind of generates that environment for you in the cloud. Using using a serverless approach, whichever sort of platform is doing that, or function as a service, or any of those kind of really high end, cloud native, very sort of top end cloud native types of services that the larger global hyperscalers, larger global public cloud providers offer. So if I was to do that, is there something in the script I can put and say, make sure this is in the UK, or make sure
Yeah.
this is only in Germany?
Yeah.
If there's no resources in Germany, then don't spin up one up in Mozambique or something, that kind of stuff. So again, from that aspect of it, that would be an interesting one to explore. Maybe we should have that conversation with the
I think we might have
lawyer.
opened the Pandora's box
We
here.
may have. So we're kind of touching on it, but cloud security, I think, or cloud sovereignty rather, is I think just as important as the data
Oh,
sovereignty
absolutely. Yeah, I
that we
think
talked about.
it was as a counter to data sovereignty that I thought we
Yeah.
ought to talk about clouds.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I said, there is other elements of it that you can probably tease out and look at in more detail, because it's not just the data's residency, as we said, it's the, potentially things like support. We
Yep.
talked about, encryption and key management, oversights, and various other things as well that you could maybe look at.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.